The meeting room of the Sagewood Meadows Community Center smelled faintly of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Dylan George sat at a long folding table, his back ramrod straight, a polite smile fixed on his face. Opposite him, the four members of the Architectural Control Committee (ACC) studied the single-page proposal he had submitted. It was a simple plan, professionally rendered, for a low garden bed border made of tumbled river stones, designed to neatly contain the mulch around his azaleas. At the head of the table sat Catherine Dunn, president of the Sagewood Meadows Homeowners Association. She wore a cream-colored cashmere twin set that seemed immune to the room's fluorescent lighting. A single strand of pearls rested on her collarbone. She peered at Dylan's proposal over the top of a pair of half-moon reading glasses. Her lips pursed in an expression of deep, almost pained, consideration. "Well, Dylan," she began, her voice smooth and measured, as if addressing a child who had presented a particularly messy finger painting. "It's certainly ambitious." Dylan's smile didn't waver. "It's just a stone border. Catherine, I thought it would add a clean edge to the landscaping, very much in line with the community's aesthetic." He had done his homework. He had read the covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs, cover to cover. A document so dense it could be used as a doorstop. There was no mention of stone borders, only a general clause about maintaining a harmonious and aesthetically pleasing appearance. His plan was the very definition of harmonious. Catherine slid the paper across the table to the other committee members. "The thing is," she continued, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the diagram, "we have to consider the overall visual flow of the neighborhood. An introduction of this type of hardscaping, even on a small scale, could disrupt the soft, organic lines we've cultivated." Dylan blinked. Organic lines. The houses are identical modern farmhouses. Catherine, the landscaping is mostly boxwoods and crepe myrtles. It's a very structured look. A faint, pitying smile touched Catherine's lips. It was a look he'd seen her use before. A look that said, "You just don't understand. Do you? You poor dear. It's about precedent. Dylan, if we approve this, what's next? Rock gardens, Zen gravel patterns. We have to protect the community from aesthetic creep." One of the other committee members, a man who always seemed to be nodding in agreement before Catherine even finished a sentence, chimed in. "Aesthetic creep. That's a good way to put it. Catherine." Dylan felt a familiar, hot prickle of frustration at the base of his neck. He kept his tone even. "I fail to see how a 6-inch-high stone border constitutes creep. It's a standard landscaping feature. The house 2 doors down has a brick border around their mailbox." Catherine's smile tightened. "That was approved in 2018 under a different set of aesthetic guidelines. We've since evolved our vision for Sagewood Meadows." She folded her hands on the table. A picture of serene authority. "I'm sorry, Dylan. The committee has to deny this request. It's simply not in keeping with the established harmony of the community." She didn't poll the other members. She didn't need to. Her word was the committee's word. The denial was a foregone conclusion the moment he'd sat down. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about power. And, in Sagewood Meadows, all power flowed from Catherine Dunn. "I understand," Dylan said, the words tasting like ash. He gathered his proposal, the crisp paper now feeling flimsy and foolish in his hands. "Thank you for your time." As he walked out of the community center and into the manicured perfection of the evening, he felt Catherine's gaze on his back. He didn't have to turn around to know she was still smiling. It wasn't a victory for her. It was just the natural order of things. Like the sun setting over the identical, HOA-approved rooftops. Dylan's home was his sanctuary. As a freelance data analyst, he spent his days immersed in the abstract world of spreadsheets, algorithms, and predictive models. The house was his anchor to the physical world, a place of quiet order where every variable was under his control. His office, a small, sunlit room on the second floor, looked directly out onto his front lawn. That lawn was his obsession. It was a perfect rectangle of fescue, meticulously cared for. He had a spreadsheet for it, tracking fertilizer schedules, aeration dates, and rainfall measurements. Weeding was a form of meditation. Mowing was a weekly ritual of creating pristine, satisfying stripes. It wasn't about impressing the neighbors or appeasing the HOA. It was for him. The clean lines and uniform green of the grass brought a sense of calm that his work, with its chaotic datasets, rarely afforded. The view from his window was a living screensaver that lowered his blood pressure. Sagewood Meadows, on the surface, was the ideal environment for a man like Dylan. The rules were extensive, but they created a predictable, orderly world. Mailboxes were uniform, trash cans were hidden, and fences were of a consistent height and color. It was a community operating on a shared, if sometimes stifling, algorithm. The algorithm's chief programmer was Catherine Dunn. She had been board president for 3 consecutive terms, a reign characterized by an almost fanatical attention to detail and a selective application of the rules. She patrolled the neighborhood in her gleaming white Chevrolet Suburban, a vehicle far too large for the narrow suburban streets, its imposing chrome grille seeming to sniff out violations. A child's bicycle left on a lawn overnight would earn a friendly but firm email. A patch of clover in a flower bed might warrant a passive-aggressive note tucked into the front door. Her enforcement was not uniform. Neighbors who were part of her social circle, the ones who attended her book club or complimented her hydrangeas, seemed to enjoy a certain immunity. Their overgrown hedges went unnoticed. Their holiday decorations lingered a week past the deadline without comment. But for those outside her favor, the rules were absolute. One of Dylan's neighbors was Mrs. Gable, a widow in her late 70s who had lived in her house since before the developer had even broken ground on the subdivision. Her rose garden was a local legend, a riot of color and fragrance that stood in stark contrast to the neighborhood's restrained landscaping. Catherine left her alone. Mostly. Mrs. Gable was a community fixture, and even Catherine knew some battles weren't worth fighting. Dylan often chatted with her as she tended her roses, her gentle presence a welcome antidote to the neighborhood's underlying tension. Dylan's own interactions with Catherine had been minimal, but consistently unpleasant. There was the time she'd measured the height of his mailbox with a tape measure while he watched from his window, and the formal warning he'd received when a gust of wind blew his recycling bin over an hour before the permitted set-out time. Each interaction was cloaked in the polite, inescapable language of HOA governance. He maintained a cordial distance, paid his dues on time, and kept his property immaculate. He believed in the system, in the idea that if you followed the rules, you would be left in peace. The ACC's rejection of his simple stone border was the first major crack in that belief. It wasn't about the rules. It was about her. A few days after the meeting, he was on the phone with his older sister, Sarah, a corporate lawyer who lived 3 states away. She said it would disrupt the organic lines, Sarah asked. A note of incredulous laughter in her voice, and something about aesthetic creep. Dylan confirmed, staring out his office window at his flawlessly edged lawn. Sounds like you're dealing with a classic petty tyrant. Little brother, my advice? Document everything, every email, every conversation. Don't give her an excuse. People like that thrive on emotional reactions. Stick to the facts. Let the paperwork do the talking. It was sound advice. Dylan created a new folder on his computer, labeling it simply HOA. For now. It contained only the rejected ACC proposal. He hoped it would stay that way. He just wanted to be left alone to enjoy his quiet, orderly life and the perfect, uninterrupted green of his lawn. On the morning of May 1st, Dylan noticed the first anomaly. Two faint, parallel lines were pressed into the dew-covered grass at the corner of his property, where the lawn met the curve of the street. They were subtle, easily mistaken for the tracks of a bicycle or a heavy stroller. He frowned, made a mental note to check the sprinkler head in that zone, and went about his day. On May the 2nd, the lines were back, but deeper. The grass wasn't just bent, it was bruised. The soil beneath, still soft from the spring rains, was visibly compressed. This was no bicycle, it was a vehicle, a heavy one. For the next 2 days, he woke up early, standing by his office window, hoping to catch the culprit. A newspaper delivery car, a landscaping truck for the house down the street, a series of commuter sedans, nothing that would explain the deliberate, recurring path cut across his property. The damage was getting worse. The green was giving way to a muddy brown, a scar on his otherwise perfect canvas. On the afternoon of May 5th, the mail carrier delivered a certified letter. Dylan signed for it with a sense of unease. It was from Prestige Property Management, the company that handled the HOA's administrative tasks. He slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. The letterhead was crisp, the language cold and formal. Formal notice of violation. Date May 4, 2024. Property 112, Willow Bend Drive. Violation. ID V 2024-043. Dear Mr. George, this letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the Sagewood Meadows covenants, conditions, and restrictions (CC&Rs). An inspection on May 3, 2024 revealed the following non-compliant item on your property. Violation, CC&R article, BARC-R 9.1, unapproved yard ornaments. Description: the presence of three decorative garden gnomes in the front landscaping bed has been noted. Per the association's governing documents, all exterior ornaments must receive prior written approval from the Architectural Control Committee ACC to ensure they are in keeping with the community-wide standard of aesthetic harmony. Action required. Please remove the non-compliant ornaments from public view within 15 days of the date of this notice. Consequence: failure to cure this violation by May 20, 2024 will result in a fine of $50 being levied against your account, with additional fines for continued non-compliance as outlined in the association's fine schedule. You have the right to contest this violation by requesting a hearing before the Board of Directors. Your request must be submitted in writing within 10 days. Sincerely, the Sagewood Meadows Board of Directors, CIO Prestige Property Management. Dylan stared at the letter, his knuckles white. The garden gnomes. They had been a gag gift from his sister years ago. They were small, tucked away behind a boxwood, barely visible from the street. They had been there for 4 years without a single complaint. The timing was no coincidence. The ACC meeting had been on April 28th. The tire track started on May 1st. The inspection was on May 3rd. This wasn't a routine notice. This was a targeted strike. He walked to the front window and looked out. The muddy tracks on his lawn seemed to mock him. Catherine couldn't get him for the stone border he had proposed, so she was attacking him for the gnomes he already had. And the tracks. He had a sickening suspicion he knew exactly who was responsible for those. 2. The retaliation was so blatant, so petty, it was almost comical, but the formal, weaponized bureaucracy of the letter made it feel sinister. This was Catherine, cloaked in the authority of the HOA, making her first move in a game he hadn't asked to play. The peace of his sanctuary had been breached. Following his sister's advice, Dylan suppressed his anger and focused on procedure. An emotional outburst would play directly into Catherine's hands. He needed to be calm, professional, and meticulous. He spent the evening composing a response. He logged into the official Sagewood Meadows online portal, a clunky interface managed by Prestige Property Management, and navigated to the Contact the Board form. He drafted his message carefully, ensuring the tone was one of a concerned homeowner seeking reasonable resolution, not an aggrieved victim. Subject inquiry regarding violation V2024-043 and property damage at 112 Willowbend Drive. To the Sagewood Meadows Board of Directors. I am writing in response to the formal violation notice V2024-CGO43 I received on May 5, 2024, regarding yard ornaments on my property. I am also writing to report significant and recurring damage to my lawn. For the past 5 mornings, a vehicle has been driving across the corner of my front lawn, leaving deep tire tracks and destroying the turf. I have attached time-stamped photographs of the damage, taken each day from May 1st to May 5th. Given that the gnomes cited in the violation notice have been in place for over 4 years without issue, the timing of this notice, immediately following the start of the daily property damage, seems highly coincidental. I am concerned that this violation is retaliatory in nature. I respectfully request that the board investigate the vandalism to my property. Furthermore, I request that violation V2024-043 be rescinded, given the circumstances and the long-standing, previously unproblematic nature of the items in question. Thank you for your time and attention to these serious matters. Sincerely, Dylan George, 112, Willowbend Drive. He attached the 5 photos, each clearly labeled with the date, and hit submit. A small green checkmark appeared. Your message has been sent to the Board of Directors and Prestige Property Management. He felt a small measure of satisfaction. It was all documented, all on the record. 2 days passed in silence. The tire tracks appeared again on Saturday morning, and again on Sunday. They were deeper now, a muddy trench carving a deliberate arc through his lawn. On Monday afternoon, a notification popped up in his email. A new message was available in the HOA portal. He logged in, his stomach tight. It was a reply from the board. The message itself was unsigned, but the voice was unmistakably Catherine's. Subject re-inquiry regarding violation V2024-043 and property damage. Mr. George, the Board of Directors has reviewed your submission. The area of your lawn you have indicated is adjacent to the public roadway and falls within the platted utility and access easement for the community, while homeowners are responsible for maintaining the landscaping in this area. The association and utility providers reserve the right of access. The board considers the matter of the tire tracks closed. Regarding violation V2024-043, the fact that a violation has gone unnoticed in the past does not preclude future enforcement. The CC&Rs are clear on the requirement for ACC approval for all yard ornaments. The violation stands. Please remedy the non-compliance by the May 20th deadline to avoid the issuance of fines. The board now considers this matter closed as well. Dylan stared at the screen, his blood turning to ice. Utility and access easement. It was a brilliant, insidious lie. He knew for a fact his property line extended to the curb. There was a utility easement, but it was a 5-foot strip running along the back of his property, not the front. She was banking on the fact that he, like most homeowners, wouldn't know the precise details of his own plat map. The board considers this matter closed. It was a dismissal, a stonewall. She was using the official voice of the board to shut down any inquiry, to legitimize her own actions while simultaneously persecuting him for a trivial, fabricated offense. He had followed the process. He had been polite and factual, and he had been summarily dismissed. The system he had trusted was being used as a weapon against him. Sarah was right. This was a petty tyrant, and it was now abundantly clear that the system itself would not protect him. He would have to protect himself. The dismissal was a declaration of war. Dylan's focus shifted from resolution to ammunition. If Catherine was going to hide behind procedure and lies, he would counter her with irrefutable, documented truth. His first purchase was a high-resolution, night vision security camera. He installed it that evening, discreetly mounting it on the trunk of a mature oak tree in his front yard, giving it a perfect, unobstructed view of the corner of his lawn. He set the motion detection sensitivity high. The next morning, at 7:22 a.m., his phone buzzed with a motion alert. He watched the live feed, his heart pounding. A gleaming white Chevrolet Suburban, identical to Catherine's, slowed as it approached his house. Without hesitation, it turned, its front passenger side tire climbing the curb and carving a fresh path through the already brutalized turf. The camera was sharp enough to capture the driver clearly, Catherine Dunn. Sunglasses on, a smug, satisfied look on her face as she glanced toward his house before accelerating away. He saved the clip, labeling it Evidence, Joe 1 May 9, MP4A. He now had his smoking gun. He called his sister that night. "She's claiming it's a utility easement," he told her, the anger in his voice cold and sharp. "Then you need to prove it's not," Sarah said, her lawyerly calm a grounding force. "Stop communicating with them entirely. No more emails, no more portal messages. From now on, you gather evidence. People like her count on you getting angry and making a mistake. We're not going to do that." The next day, Dylan remembered Arthur Gable, Mrs. Gable's son, who lived a few streets over. He corrected himself. It wasn't Arthur Gable, but Arthur Peterson. He was a quiet, unassuming man in his late 60s, a retired land surveyor who Dylan had chatted with a few times at neighborhood gatherings. Arthur had a reputation for being meticulous and having a deep-seated dislike for bureaucratic overreach. He found Arthur in his garage workshop, surrounded by blueprints and antique surveying equipment. Dylan explained the situation calmly, laying out the timeline, Catherine's claim of an easement, and the retaliatory gnome violation. Arthur listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Dylan finished, he was silent for a long moment, wiping his hands on a rag. "Catherine Dunn," he said, the name tasting like a bad memory. "She tried to find me once because the oil stain on my driveway was, and I quote, not conforming to the natural color palette of the asphalt. I've seen her type before. All power, no accountability." He wouldn't get publicly involved, he said, but he would advise him. "You need 3 things," Arthur instructed, ticking them off on his fingers. "First, go to the county recorder's office. Don't download a copy online. Get a certified sealed copy of the final subdivision plat map for Sagewood Meadows. Section 2. It's a public record. It will show every property line, every setback, and every legally recorded easement, down to the inch. Her claims won't stand up against a sealed county document." Second, he continued, submit a formal written request to the HOA, via certified mail, for copies of all Board of Directors meeting minutes for the last 3 years, as is your right under state law. Don't use the portal. A signed certified mail receipt is your proof they received it. You're looking for patterns. And third, Arthur concluded, his eyes glinting, request the association's complete, audited financial statements for the same period. If she's abusing power in one area, she's likely sloppy in others. Follow the money. Dylan followed Arthur's instructions to the letter. The trip to the county recorder's office was an exercise in bureaucratic patience, but he walked out with a heavy cardboard tube containing the official plat map. That evening, he sent a formal, legally phrased records request to Prestige Property Management via certified mail. 2 weeks later, a thick manila envelope arrived. It contained the meeting minutes. Dylan spent hours reading through them, a tedious chronicle of debates over pool furniture and mulch selection. But then he found it. In the minutes for a meeting, dated June 12, 2022, a full paragraph in the middle of the document was blacked out, labeled with the single word, redacted. The section before it discussed homeowner complaints. The section after it was about budget approvals. What could possibly be so sensitive in a discussion of homeowner complaints that it required redaction? He now had the video, the sealed plat map waiting in its tube, and a new mystery, a blacked-out paragraph in the official record. The foundation of his case was being built, piece by meticulous piece. While waiting for the financial documents to arrive, Dylan's analytical mind gnawed at a single, unanswered question. Why a simple power trip seemed insufficient to explain the level of sustained personal animosity. This felt like a vendetta, but a vendetta over what? His rejected stone border, his gnomes. It didn't add up. His work involved finding patterns in vast, disconnected seas of data, and he decided to apply that same skill set to Catherine Dunn. He started with public records, cross-referencing property deeds, business licenses, and political contribution records. It was tedious, but it was the kind of puzzle he was built to solve. He found her husband, Robert Dunn, was the owner of a mid-sized civil engineering firm, Dunn and Associates Engineering. He then expanded his search to local business journals and news archives, plugging in the names Dunn and Associates and his own business name, George Data Solutions. He wasn't expecting a hit. He ran a quiet, one-man consultancy. His clients were mostly out of state, and he rarely competed for local contracts. But then, a result popped up. It was a digital article from the Tri-County Business Journal, dated 4 years prior. The headline read, Municipal Board awards data infrastructure contract to local sole proprietor. Dylan's blood ran cold. He remembered the contract. It was a massive project for the county, overhauling their data management systems. It had been the biggest win of his career, setting him up financially for years and allowing him to buy his house in Sagewood Meadows. He clicked the link. The article detailed the bidding process. 2 firms had made the final round his own, George Data Solutions, and the runner-up, Dunn and Associates Engineering. He read the crucial paragraph, his eyes scanning the words as the puzzle pieces slammed into place. The board's decision came after a lengthy review, with the final vote favoring George Data Solutions' highly competitive bid. Sources familiar with the bids indicated that the proposal from Dunn and Associates Engineering, while robust, was priced nearly 40% higher, a differential the board deemed unjustifiable for the taxpayer. The loss of the contract was seen as a significant blow to the local firm. He leaned back in his chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating his stunned face. 40%. His lower overhead as a solo operator had allowed him to drastically underbid them. He had, completely unknowingly, cost Catherine Dunn's husband a lucrative, multi-year government contract. The contract that had allowed him to move into her neighborhood, her kingdom. Suddenly, everything made sense. The constant, petty harassment wasn't random. The condescension in the ACC meeting wasn't just about her personality. The immediate, vicious retaliation over the gnomes. The daily, deliberate destruction of his lawn. It was all payback. She had been waiting, perhaps for years, for an opportunity. She had watched him move into her domain, a constant reminder of the money her family had lost. His meticulously kept lawn wasn't just a lawn to her. It was a symbol of the life he had built with the money she believed should have been hers. And she was now, quite literally, tearing it down, one tire track at a time. This fight was no longer about grass or gnomes or aesthetic harmony. It was about a 4-year-old grudge. Catherine wasn't trying to enforce the rules. She was trying to make him feel as powerless and financially injured as she must have felt when her husband lost that contract. The knowledge was terrifying, but it was also clarifying. He now understood his enemy's motive, and knowing the why made him even more determined to control the how of her defeat. With her motive now clear, Catherine's next moves felt less like random acts of tyranny and more like the calculated escalation of a long, simmering war. The day after his discovery, another certified letter arrived. Notice of hearing. Dear Mr. George, please be advised that the Board of Directors will hold a hearing regarding your continued and unremedied violations v. 2024-043 and your formal complaint against the association. The hearing is scheduled to take place during the annual members' meeting on June 5, 2024, at 7:00 p.m. in the Sagewood Meadows Community Center. You will be allotted 5 minutes to present your case to the board and members in attendance. The board's decision following the hearing will be final. It was a trap. She wasn't giving him a private hearing with the board. She was staging a public spectacle at the annual meeting, the most well-attended event of the year. She planned to humiliate him in front of his neighbors, to paint him as a disgruntled homeowner, and use the public forum to solidify her own authority. A week later, the stakes were raised again. A third certified letter, this one with more aggressive legal language. Notice of intent to file a lien. Due to continued non-payment of outstanding fines and fees related to violation v. 2024-043, the Sagewood Meadows Homeowners Association hereby provides notice of its intent to place a lien upon your property at 112 Willowbend Drive. You have 30 days to remit payment in full to avoid this action. It was absurd a lien for a $50 fine he was in the process of formally contesting, but the threat was real. An HOA lien could complicate his mortgage and damage his credit. It was a bureaucratic cudgel designed to intimidate him into submission before the hearing. The final blow came not from the HOA, but from his homeowner's insurance company. He received a letter from their underwriting department. Dear Mr. George, we have received an anonymous report regarding potential liability risks on your property, specifically concerning unapproved and improperly installed landscaping structures along the public right-of-way. To ensure continued compliance with your policy terms, we will require a formal inspection of your property within the next 45 days. Failure to comply or remedy any identified risks may affect your policy's continuation. Dylan's blood ran cold. The unapproved structures didn't even exist yet. It was a reference to the stone border she had denied. She was preemptively attacking him, not just through the HOA, but by threatening the very insurability of his home. She was trying to corner him from every possible angle, burying him in a procedural avalanche. He felt a surge of panic, the walls closing in. He picked up the phone and called Sarah, his voice tight with stress as he detailed the onslaught of notices. Deep breath. Dylan, she said, her voice a steady anchor. This is what they do. It's a classic squeeze play. They want you to panic, to get angry, to call her up and scream. Don't. You are going to remain silent. You are going to stick to the plan." "What plan?" "Sarah. She's coming at me from everywhere." "The hearing is the plan," she said firmly. "She thinks a public forum is her arena. But it's going to be hers, and your gallows. You have the video. You have the plat map. You have the redacted minutes. You have her motive. This isn't a battle of wills anymore. It's a presentation of evidence. Do not engage. Do not respond to the letters. Just prepare your presentation for June 5th. Let the paperwork do the talking. Dylan, let it scream." He took a deep breath, her words cutting through his anxiety. She was right. Every letter, every threat, was just another piece of evidence of Catherine's targeted harassment. He would not be broken. He would be prepared. He turned his focus to the hearing, transforming his binder of documents into a script for a 5-minute procedural drama. With a climax he was certain Catherine Dunn would never see coming. The Sagewood Meadows Community Center was packed. Most annual meetings drew a sparse crowd, but word of the showdown between Dylan and Catherine had spread. The air was thick with anticipation. Catherine sat at the head table with the other 4 board members, looking regal and composed. A large digital clock was projected on the screen behind her, currently displaying the meeting's agenda. Dylan sat in the 3rd row, a simple leather binder resting on his lap. He felt a strange, cold calm. He had rehearsed his 5 minutes dozens of times, timing it to the second. After an hour of tedious budget reports and committee updates, Catherine's voice rang out. "We now move to the homeowner hearing for 112 Willow Bend Drive. Mr. George, you have 5 minutes to address the board." The digital clock on the screen was replaced by a new one, its red numerals glowing 5:00. It began to count down. Dylan walked to the podium, plugged a USB stick into the provided laptop, and faced the room. "Good evening, board members, neighbors." 4:45. He began calmly. "I am here to address violation Vashie T24043 and to present evidence of a pattern of targeted harassment by our board president, Catherine Dunn." He clicked the remote. The first image appeared on the screen, a pristine photo of his lawn from April. He followed it with a daily sequence of photos from May, showing the escalating damage. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then, he played the video. The room was silent as the white Suburban, Catherine clearly visible at the wheel, deliberately drove across his lawn. 3:50. When I reported this damage, President Dunn informed me, in an official board communication, that the vehicle was on a utility and access easement. This is false. He clicked again. A high-resolution scan of the certified, sealed county plat map filled the screen. He used the laser pointer from the podium, as the official county record shows. My property line extends to the curb. There is no front-facing easement. The only easement is a 5-foot strip at the rear of my property. The daily destruction of my lawn was not an act of association business. It was simple trespassing. The management company representative, a man in an ill-fitting suit, began scribbling furiously on a legal pad. 2:45. The violation notice for my garden gnomes, which I received just after this began, was not routine enforcement. It was retaliation, and it seems to be part of a pattern. He projected a copy of the meeting minutes from June 12, 2022, with the large black, redacted bar. I was curious what the board felt was necessary to hide from the members in a discussion of homeowner complaints. It turns out. So was a former board member. He held up a single sheet of paper. This is a sworn and notarized affidavit from Mr. Charles Henderson, who resigned from the board in July of 2022. Catherine shot to her feet. Point of order. This is inadmissible. This is a private board matter. The management rep put a hand on her arm. Let him finish. Catherine, it's his allotted time. Dylan's voice remained steady. Mr. Henderson's affidavit confirms that the redacted paragraph detailed a formal censure of Catherine Dunn for driving her vehicle across the lawn of another homeowner, Mr. Davies, at 214 Summercrest Lane. Mr. Davies moved out of our community 1 month later. Gasps echoed through the room. The narrative was clear. Catherine had a history of this exact behavior. 1:30 now. In preparing my case, my official property survey revealed one other minor technical issue. He projected the plat map again. This time zoomed in on Mrs. Gable's property 2 doors down. It shows that the beautiful rose garden Mrs. Gable has tended for 40 years. A feature I think we all treasure. Technically, encroaches on a common area by 6 inches. Mrs. Gable, sitting in the front row, put a hand to her chest, her face pale with terror. Catherine seized the opportunity, a triumphant smirk on her face. See, his entire case is a sham by his own evidence. Mrs. Gable is in violation. He wants to tear down an old woman's roses to save his gnomes. All of his evidence must be disregarded. 1:00. Dylan looked directly at the crowd, his voice softening. No, I don't want to tear down anything. What I want is fairness and decency in our community. I want to protect our neighbors, not persecute them over inches of dirt. He turned back to the board. That's why my final proposal tonight is not about my gnomes. It's a motion for a new bylaw, a community-wide amnesty for any non-obstructive landscaping encroachment of less than 12 inches that has been in place for 10 years or more. A bylaw to protect long-term residents like Mrs. Gable from being targeted by petty, selective enforcement. The room erupted, not in murmurs, but in loud, sustained applause. Mrs. Gable was openly weeping with relief. Dylan had turned Catherine's attack back on her, framing himself not as a victim, but as a defender of the community's soul. 0:30. With his remaining time, he delivered the final, devastating blow, tying it all together. This campaign of harassment, the lies about easements, the retaliation, it's not about rules. It's about a personal vendetta stemming from a business contract my company won 4 years ago, a contract that President Dunn's husband's company lost. The final piece clicked into place. The crowd's applause turned to stunned silence, their gazes shifting to Catherine, whose face was a mask of pure fury. The clock on the screen flashed 0:00. Dylan lowered the laser pointer. My time is up. Dylan walked back to his seat. The silence in the room so profound he could hear the hum of the projector fan. Every eye was on the head table, where the board of directors sat frozen. Catherine Dunn was ashen-faced, her carefully constructed composure shattered. The management company representative looked as if he desperately wished the floor would swallow him whole. He leaned over and whispered urgently to the board's vice president. It was a homeowner, a man from the back of the room, who broke the silence. I want to second Mr. George's motion for the amnesty bylaw, he shouted. So do I, another voice called out. Suddenly, the room was buzzing. People were on their feet, talking animatedly. The carefully controlled script of the annual meeting had been torn to shreds. Neighbors were exchanging looks of dawning comprehension, piecing together years of Catherine's odd, selective enforcement. The whispers weren't just about Dylan's case anymore. They were about their own experiences. She fined me for having the wrong shade of white on my trim. Remember when the Parkers had to move their basketball hoop 3 times? Her husband's company got the new contract for the pool resurfacing. Didn't they? The board's vice president, a mild-mannered man who usually deferred to Catherine on everything, tapped his microphone. Order, please. Let's have order. He cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact with Catherine. In light of the information presented, The board will table the matter of the violation notice against 112 Willowbend Drive indefinitely. Furthermore, the board will now move into an immediate executive session to discuss a personnel matter. It was a stunning capitulation. He had used the correct procedural term, personnel matter, to refer to the conduct of the board president. Catherine's allies on the board, two women who were part of her book club, stared fixedly at the tabletop, refusing to look at her. The social armor that had protected her for years had dissolved in under 5 minutes. As the board members filed out toward a small side room, homeowners swarmed Dylan. Mrs. Gable hugged him, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Arthur gave him a firm, approving nod from across the room. People he'd only ever waved to were shaking his hand, patting him on the back. "Thank you for speaking up," one woman said. "She's been a tyrant for years." Dylan watched Catherine. She remained seated at the table, utterly alone, as the community she had ruled over buzzed around her, the power having shifted so completely and publicly that it was a physical presence in the room. When she finally stood to follow the rest of the board into the executive session, she didn't look at anyone. Her reign was over. The paperwork had not just talked. It had delivered a eulogy. A week after the tumultuous annual meeting, a special e-newsletter was sent to every resident of Sagewood Meadows. The tone was formal and concise. The board of directors had voted unanimously on several key measures. First, all fines and pending actions against Dylan George had been formally and permanently rescinded. Second, the board had issued a formal censure against Catherine Dunn for actions inconsistent with the board's code of ethics and fiduciary duty. Third, Catherine Dunn had tendered her resignation from the board of directors, effective immediately. Dylan's proposed amnesty bylaw was put to a special community-wide vote and passed with 92% approval. Mrs. Gable's rose garden was safe. The victory was complete. But Dylan knew the problem wasn't just Catherine. It was the system of unchecked power that had allowed her to flourish. At the next monthly meeting, with a new interim president at the helm, Dylan, now seen as a calm and principled voice of reason, took the floor. He didn't gloat or rehash the past. Instead, he spoke about the future. Transparency is the foundation of a healthy community. He said, "To restore trust, I propose the board commission a fully independent, third-party forensic audit of the association's finances for the past 5 years." The motion, which would have been unthinkable under Catherine's rule, was passed without objection. 2 months later, the results of the audit were presented at another packed meeting. The final surprise was more shocking than anyone had anticipated. The auditors had uncovered a clear pattern of financial misconduct. For 3 years, Catherine had used her presidential authority to steer no-bid or single-bid contracts for major community projects: landscaping, pool maintenance, fence repair, and snow removal to a company called Evergreen Community Solutions. Further investigation revealed that Evergreen was a shell corporation. Secretly owned by her husband's brother, it was a classic kickback scheme, siphoning tens of thousands of dollars of community funds into her own family's pockets. The fallout was immediate and absolute. The community voted to terminate its contract with Prestige Property Management for their gross negligence and complicity in failing to flag the suspicious transactions. The board, with legal counsel, initiated proceedings to recoup the misappropriated funds. With a new, more transparent management company in place and a completely new board elected in a special election, Dylan politely declined a nomination. Preferring his quiet life, Sagewood Meadows began to heal. The recovered money was placed into a newly established community restoration fund. Its first official act was to hire a landscape architect to formally incorporate Mrs. Gable's rose garden into the common area design, complete with a small bronze plaque honoring her decades of care. One sunny afternoon, Dylan sat in his office, looking out at his lawn. It was a perfect, uninterrupted sheet of green. The gnomes were still there, tucked behind the boxwood. His simple stone border, finally approved by the new ACC without a moment's hesitation, neatly contained his azaleas. The neighborhood felt lighter, the air clearer. The quiet, orderly peace he had so valued had finally been restored, not by ignoring the rules, but by demanding they be applied fairly to everyone.